G'day folks and welcome to the Encounters Down Under podcast. I'm your host Anthony Goodall and I invite guests to the show to share their amazing encounters with aliens and UFOs. If you or someone you know has had an encounter down under or anywhere in the world for our new segment Encounters Unbound, please get in touch with me via the Encounters Down Under Facebook page or email at australianUFOsightings@outlook.com.au. Be sure to join the Encounters Down Under Facebook page and YouTube channel where you can also get involved during the live stream interviews, sharing your thoughts and opinions during the live show. Also, if you enjoyed the podcast, don't forget to give us a rating and review on your favourite listening platform. But anyway, that's enough from me. Let's get into what you've been waiting for. Kick back and relax with your favourite beverage and enjoy the show. This episode is available to view on our YouTube channel, so be sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with your thoughts on the episode. G'day folks and welcome to another episode of Encounters Down Under. Mark joins us on the podcast who surprisingly hasn't had any personal encounters, but has a strong curiosity into the UFO topic. With a scientific background, he studied in the phenomena for nearly 40 years and believes he may have an explanation into the manipulations of consciousness and abductions. So please welcome to the show, Mark. Welcome to the show there, Mark.
Thanks for having me on, Anthony. It's a pleasure to be here. This is a first time for me for this sort of forum, so go easy.
Yeah, mate. It's absolutely great having you on.
Do hope that I can give some sort of elaboration on this whole contactee thing that is a terrific phenomena that needs much more research. And I think I've done a little bit that might just add a bit to that base of knowledge that we do have and some insights of where our research should be going.
No, sounds good, mate. Look, the thing that you sort of caught me a bit by surprise when you contacted me, like you said that you didn't have an experience of your own. Like, it's not very often that you can't have someone that doesn't have an experience to even be diving down this topic.
It is. I'm more of a science sort of background. My actual background is I'm a scientific glassblower. I work with scientists. I work with the scientific method where we're all very skeptical. My friends and family are all scientists and everything. So some of us will talk a little candidly about this and, offhandedly, whereas others, it's just like, well, I didn't experience anything, so I can't actually make any statement. I'm more of the opinion that after reading so many accounts since I was a kid, looking at this UFO thing in the 70s, I had the Time Life Unexplained magazines, and it was fascinating as a kid. And it was just, it could be fantasy, or it could be something else. And as more and more research has come to light, more people are coming out with it, it's becoming destigmatized. We're starting to see that this trend, this phenomena of the UAPs and contact with, intelligent entities is starting to become more talked about. And what is happening through it being more talked about, of course, we're starting to see huge similarities from across the planet, of course, and across time. So it really intrigued me. There's like, why across all cultures and across time, why would there be so many similarities in the accounts of what the contactees are saying? So there must be something to this phenomena. And I think to ignore it, aside from just lights in the sky and with better metrics and better optics with FLIR cameras and multispectral analysis, yes, we're getting better data with this, but it's the experiences that are really worthy of a bit of analysis to say what's common about this, because when you dig into it, there really is a strong hint at what's actually going on from the perspective of the other intelligences and what they really are doing with us and why they're here and why they might be doing some of the insane things that we seem to hear. There is no really typical experience. Clearly, there's a lot of weirdness, but there's also some really fundamentals that that we can make some basics, draw a basis around, and then we can build up from there. I hope that makes some sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like, to me, I feel like the experiences are the first hand experiences who are coming out with their encounters. They're basically the front lines to this whole thing, you know. And
Yes.
to me, I find that's where all the credibility lies. Like, okay, yeah, okay, there's some fraudulent sort of videos that go out there to try and I don't know, try and make some sort of humor, or they're out there for some sort of profits. They're trying to market off it. But then you get the people that
Yeah,
don't gain anything from it, who have nothing to, or they've got nothing to gain from this, and they're still coming out forward with like destroying their
yeah,
reputation or their livelihoods
you're
potentially.
right, and that's the funny thing is that the amount of accounts that you've read over the years where people just say, "Look, I just want to remain anonymous. I just need it out there. I need to sort of say it as almost a cathartic process," and they don't want fame. They don't want to be known for it. So clearly, the only motive is what they've experienced, and that has to be really listened to.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, tell me where this first started for you. Like, how did you sort of come across this to want to really start diving down to it?
Oh, well, I've always been interested in the topic, and it's always been in the background, of course. And recently, good old YouTube. I have to, I have to have a nod to many of the channels now that are uploading some extraordinarily good content. A shout out to Mr. Black of Beyond Creepy. I think we can link him. I think he's Canadian. He sounds Canadian. Has done an amazing work on the paranormal, and it was only a little while ago I was watching his show and his uploads and his analysis of some of the accounts that he's dragged out. Many, many, many accounts and real weird stuff. And of course, it just brought back all the memories of the accounts that I'd read as a kid, in the 70s and 80s, reading this and going, it's all the same stuff. And even though there's modern stuff now, it's still the same phenomenon. I had to start going, all right, I really have to solve this. There's something going on here. It's kind of what I do. I really don't like a paradox. It's infuriating. And so finding some links and commonalities and sharing it with some friends who are also into this, they said, I think you're onto something here. You might want to talk to someone and put this out there. So here we are, and hopefully we might, with the help of your listeners, help us see if we're on the right track with where this is going.
Yeah,
So we only have an
absolutely.
hour, so I might just jump in straight away and almost sort of take off on a little bit of a lecture because
Go for it.
I've got a bit of a plan to how to explain this. So let's just dive straight in, and let me say one of the things that you see over and over and over again is that not only is you see the light in the sky, the first thing you hear about is the ability to control someone's psychology and even their sense of reality. We hear again and again that there was this intense fear. And on the flip side, we have an intense sense of calm. Automatically, the person or the contactee will say later it was abnormal for the circumstance of what I felt. It was like I was manipulated. Then comes the experience of things like paralysis, missing time, like feeling like that there was a staring like a rabbit in a headlights type of stultified sort of weird effects that someone was controlling them. Obviously, the craft, this bright light that they've seen, a bright cone of light hitting the ground, moving towards them, almost scanning them at times. This sort of thing seems to be a very common beginning to the contactee experience. It's like it's the your archetypical bare bones basic contactee experience. That's what it all starts with. And after that, we go into sort of another sort of divergence, is that there's a sort of you're being probed physically or you're being tested mentally. And the tested physical probe type of thing, it's sort of almost like, was it Bill and Betty Hill back in the 50s, who were taken away
Betty
by
and
their...
Barney Hill, I think it is.
Barney Hill, correct. Sorry, Barney Hill, in the 50s. Yes, they were sort of the first archetypical grey experience where they were taken on board a craft, sort of probed, sort of interrogated. and sort of let go again. And there was missing time. There's all the classic aspects of this. So why all the ability for these beings to be able to control our mind and our behaviors? And the next part, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself, is really, really, fundamental to their technology. And then comes the telepathy, the communication. We hear again and again that they were given messages, they were given voices in their head without direct communication. So telepathy is another aspect of this technology, which means it's an advanced form of consciousness. I'd say amplification. They sort of know how to amplify their consciousness, and that they can override our consciousness. It's a higher level of technology than we've got. But it sets up, from what I can see, it sets up what they're really interested in. And consciousness really boils down to it. And I think if you're in this field, you're starting to hear from Luis Elizondo, Stephen Greer, Frank Vallee, the idea of consciousness keeps turning up again and again, that consciousness is a really big part of this phenomenon. These beings are studying us from afar. They are constantly testing what we do in certain situations, and are constantly updating their knowledge of what we do in certain situations. And that's what I started to see again and again, was that we were put in situations that was otherwise familiar to us, and then given some aspect to process. An account that I heard was like a Sadecki incident, as a guy in Poland, I think his name was Sadecki, who had a craft come down, and these beings said to him, "Don't worry, we've got a malfunction and we need to fix our craft." It just so happens that Sadecki was a mechanic. Now, the fact that they'd already known that he was a mechanic, and they were giving him a setup to process this to the way he would process it. And then they took him aboard his ship, and then were given this obscure crises. They said something had escaped their ship, and they needed him to leave and run as fast as you can. So they set it up into a way that he could understand. They bring him on board. They ask a few questions. He didn't see anything that was particularly alien or unfamiliar to him that was too shocking. And then he was told to run. This fear part of it is the next thing I'm going to get to as well, because it's a very, very big part of how these intelligences finish the conversation in many, many, many times. The fear seems to be used as a technology. And this is the part where I think I've got something to add to this experience. Getting ahead of myself. I was trying to get it all together in a
you're right.
full
look
idea. But is this starting to make sense? So I've got a general sense of the phenomena.
Yeah, absolutely. Because as a lot of people have explaining, fear is even to use it in our own terms, fear is a very powerful tool. So of course, when it's to be used to your advantage, you're going to use it, aren't you? And it doesn't matter who you are, whether you're an alien being or what these beings are, human nature, it's some sort of result in fear, or any way you can sort of control the situation, you're going to use that advantage.
Now, the whole idea of fear, from a human perspective, is very different to the way these aliens use fear. And this is the jump in awareness that I think I want people to understand, is that if you have, let's just pull back a bit about what we know about telepathy. We talk about it as though we know the phenomena, and it's in pop culture everywhere. And yet it's no scientific phenomena. It's not studied. It's not a phenomena that can be ever described scientifically, because it's not able to be done by humans on any regular basis, and therefore it can't be put into a scientific situation, or the model of the way science is conducted. Is you don't have a control group, you don't have a control situation, you don't have variables you can control. Our experience of telepathy is very, very infrequent.
From a public perspective.
From a public perspective, everyone has always got this one weird experience where they say, it was funny, I was just sitting there, I was washing the car, just minding my own business, and I have this weird intrusive thought that I've got to call Aunt Jenny or something. And then 2 days later, Aunt Jenny just sort of pops up with, oh my God, she's sick and was trying to contact you. Or it's like, I haven't spoken to you for ages. Like, why did this thing intrude into my head? Why did this thought that didn't have a causal relationship to it? Why did we do that? Why did we have a sense of danger or a something that you go, I knew I just shouldn't go there. And next minute, yeah, there was something, and you go, why did I have that intrusive thought? It's through all humankind. It's completely unstudyable, and yet every human has had that experience or knows someone who's actually really good at it. And yet so while we know about it, we're not good at using it. Yeah. And clearly this technology that an alien, non-human, high intelligent species has, is they've managed to master this. This is more than just a bit of telepathy or more than just a kook thing. Their whole technology, everything about what they do, is based on this higher level of consciousness at a telepathic method, a telepathic ability. Now, we're just starting to get our head around this from a scientific point of view, and I'm sure some of our listeners, and I'm sure you've heard of remote viewing technology, absolutely, that someone like Hal Puthoff at Stanford was doing. And that the success of this program was not insignificant. It was shut down, and it was also, it was also investigated by powers who thought it was overreaching its ability, and was, it's got a fantastic history. And I dare say anyone who would look into this, I'd have a pop-up here, someone showing a link to the psychic spy programs and Hal Puthoff. We've got the School of Noetic Sciences by Dean Radin, who has done some amazing work with his thing. And again, a pop-up I'd do for Dean Radin and School of Noetic Sciences. Some things are a little controversial. Some things have good scientific criticism of his methods. Others are, well, yes, you can criticize it, prima facie, but also you can see the results are not insignificant, which leads us to well, there might actually be a primitive form of this technology starting to be well understood from a scientific point of view, and clearly this is something that we are primitive with. But the things that we do know about this, and we know about things like quantum mechanics and quantum computing, is the whole idea of entangled states. What this means for consciousness is actually probably a topic I think I could go into all by itself, but it's there's some strong mathematics behind it, and maybe I won't go down that path just yet. But let's just keep it simple and say that the technology for telepathic communication and telepathic non-local information flow, from sounds a bit more academic, has some very strong conditions to it. If you are able to, and I think this is something that you can just think about as a thought experiment, is if you're able to project your consciousness out of your, shall we say, head towards someone else, in other words, another being, you could also project it anywhere in the room, anywhere on the planet, as we know from the remote viewing project. So it stands to reason that these beings need to be in a very quiet psychological environment to be well connected to amplify their own consciousness in order to communicate with themselves and their ship. So if you are using technology that has those requirements, the last thing you'd want is to be in an area with lots of scattered, highly loud consciousnesses, such as our primitive minds, in a large number. It could very easily overwhelm these beings and their technology, which amplifies their own consciousness, which means you see these encounters under very remote circumstances. It's usually only one or two witnesses. You never see the contactee experience in very large numbers. I mean, aside from, say, Westall or Zimbabwe. Westall's just down the road from where I live. Very famous large number of encounters with people, encounters with large numbers of people, but very, very rare. And I'd say with Westall, it was almost inadvertent. There was no contact. They were just craft that seemed inadvertently landed through some happenstance that the pilots needed to do, but not actually contact anyone. Whereas the Zimbabwe account was seemingly more deliberate. I'm not quite sure, why and how many were actually involved in the contactee experience, but it is an outlier. The contactee experience is usually a one-on-one thing, and it's in a remote place. It's often at nighttime, where the individual being contacted has less visual stimulus going on, and so their mind is probably a little stiller. It gives someone who has consciousness amplifying technology the ability to manipulate or engage with them with that in mind. Does that start to make a bit more sense as a premise behind what's going on?
Yeah, absolutely. It's sort of like, they've got a deliberate target on someone as why they're taking interest in that person, basically. And whether that
That's
could be the higher consciousness, absolutely. There's got to be something there that does it.
There's definitely a link here with this, and there are, aside from the fact that it's done at night and it's done in remote situations in order to minimize the amount of psychic connection to things, so you're more easily overwhelmed. There are other reasons of why the contactee phenomena seems to follow individuals and then families. If someone's had a contactee experience, it's very often that someone around them or in close proximity to them is now finding themselves seeing alien craft where they'd never seen it before. And I'm still kind of wrapping my head around the fact that there are plenty of people who can see craft when others next to you can't. It has something to do with our hardware. Gary Nolan has brought up a really interesting thing. I think it was he was on Lex Fridman's podcast recently, and he brought up the idea that since Gary Nolan is, I don't know, do you know Gary Nolan? Does that ring a bell?
I know. He's the isn't he the neuroscientist?
He's the exactly.
So,
he's the neuroscientist, and he's been studying contactees with some pretty advanced technology like MRI imaging.
Yep.
And I think his latest finding was that contactees have a very distinct part of their brain which is a little more active in that group than, say, normal humanity. It's called the basal ganglia, which is sort of a sub-brain. It processes your environment and awareness at a higher level than just your visual spatial awareness thing. It's sort of doing things as an autopilot that allows you to just navigate your field without actually having to think about it. If you go to sit down and the chair's behind you, you just instantly grab your hand and drag it towards you without having to actively think about every movement you're doing. This part of your brain just knows, it's a chair, it weighs about this much. This is how much force you should put on it when you just go to do it. You don't have to think about it if you've got this on autopilot. So the basal ganglia and its awareness function seems to be more highly stimulated in the contactee. Could this be a reason why they're contacting these people? Or have they stimulated these people, in earlier contacts, and now it's become more developed? Don't know. Maybe Lex Fridman has got more of an idea. Yeah, pulling up a bit of a basal ganglia idea about what it does. Yeah, give him an idea of what science actually thinks it does. There's even Gary Nolan. He says, it's got two camps that scientists can say that it has its main function.
I'm hoping people can see that.
Yeah, people can see that. They can look into that themselves. It's definitely it exists. It's not pseudoscience, thankfully. But the whole idea of this consciousness and higher awareness, again, it has a connection to it. So, what do you do? One thing we know about psychic type connections, or even in quantum mechanics, if you observe something, quantum mechanics says that you don't just observe it, you participate in the event. It's like I look at a candle, the light that is hitting my eyes ultimately means that those photons that left that candle when they impact my photoreceptors have actually helped change certain chemical functions of the chemicals that actually cause those photons to leave the chemical reaction. You're entwined and entangled into this sort of complex state of the universe that, there's this flood of quantum mechanical weirdness that goes on, but you're not divorced from that. Causality is no longer independent of the observer. You're not just passive, you're somehow active with it. And the things that we know about the telepathic, the psychic experiences, and I have had those, by the way, though I do have psychic weirdness that has gone on, and so is my family. My wife's mother is actually really good at it. So despite having no logical scientific explanation, it's observable. It's a known phenomenon.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I've gone through this whole the psychic abilities there. I've had some guests on the show there where they've claimed their family has like a bit of an ability on its own. They've even worked with military governments, obviously not in the public.
It's a thing.
And which they they were doing tests there. They were trying to make sure see how strong your abilities are to the point where it might be deemed useful in a sense. And I know for a fact that, well, so the rumors go. I'm not going to say for a fact, but so the rumors go that the Americans were using these abilities to try and do remote viewing to the Russians there during the Cold War, or they were doing heaps of studies on that matter, trying to keep that advantage ahead of them in any way, any means by possible. So there's definitely stories there. So to say no one knows this ability, I think they're keeping their head in the sand on that part. So there's definitely something there.
There's definitely something there, and I think we're starting to see this connection to the UAP phenomena, and the one thing that I'm going to bring this back now down to fear, and why there is such a strong link to the paranormal creepiness that comes into the UAP slash contactee experience. There's the archetypical Men in Black thing, where these entities, these menacing entities, come in and sort of hustle you to sort of shut the hell up about the experience and don't think about this anymore and don't say anything about it. Then comes the acculturated versions of this fear-based thing, where you are shown something from your cultural background. There's a woman who was hearing thumps around her house, and then in the middle of the night, and then goes out to this small church because she sort of felt drawn out to see it. And there were these goblin-like figures spiraling up in the air above this church, and this sense of dread and terror about it. We're given visions of things that we know are otherwise told by mythology to be something we fear. And I think these beings are playing with this to study our response and update their database on what our culture uses as fear and how it affects us. There's so many crazy things, people seeing these weird cryptids, that glowing eyes in the dark, and I heard an account recently, again, Mr. Black from Beyond Creepy, thanks dude, a kid who was walking through the forest, light in the sky, small grey type beings, almond eyes, the silvery jumpsuit type of thing, sort of stultify him while he's walking in the forest, small thing that goes into his nose while he's being probed, telepathy, all of that. And just casually, this creature who's probing him and holding him, pinned in time for about 2 days, just casually asks him, "Do you know who Satan is? Do you know Lucifer?" Nothing more. That was it. And then just, he realizes that the sun and the moon sort of pass through the sky like a time-lapse video, and then he's suddenly out of it later, and he's released, and he goes back to his mum and realizes 2 days is gone, and he's just totally flummoxed by this whole thing. Why would you be asking a kid, "Do you know who Satan is? Do you know who Lucifer is?" while you're being probed? These are things we're told through a cultural thing to be afraid of. This sounded a quintessential contactee experiments where they're testing what we know about the things that make us afraid. I don't think this is, foreign to this topic. And I think, if I put a ring around it, I think everyone would nod and go, "Yeah, it happens. It's definitely a thing."
Yeah, it's a strange thing, really. Even though, like you're saying, asking people who Lucifer, right? But there's a thing too, where people are growing up with the bedtime stories of voodoo creatures and that, with
A
vampires,
boogeyman.
werewolves, boogeyman in general. And
Yeah.
again, that's whether that's a fear tactic or something. You go to sleep, otherwise the boogeyman might get you. Try and keep kids in bed. Or don't go somewhere because the bad man might take you or something in that regards. Again, it's
Yeah.
still manipulating fear to try and control something, whether to keep you safe or to try and
To play
control.
with your mind. I think there was the what was that? I got an account here that I remember. Some some girl. Oh yeah, someone who was who called into Art Bell's interview. She was only age 6, which is another common thing, by the way. There's so many kids around about 6 to 10 seem to have contactee experiences, and they seem to be put in these weird, fearful situations that they don't understand at the time. That happens a lot. So it looks very much like this is a test. Well, let's put these kids, let's give them some extremely fearful thing, and we'll see where the brain goes to cement these ideas of fear. where her and her sister were out playing in a backyard. It was daytime, but they were in a remote area by themselves. And she wondered, where's my sister Denise? Roxanne, Napa Valley, 1962. And she goes to find her sister. She jumped up on the fence that she's told, no, you don't ever go past that fence. It's dangerous. I said to mum. And so they didn't, although they would sneak over occasionally, kids being kids. And she noticed when she jumped up on the fence to look if her sister Denise was anywhere, there were the men in black, a black hat, black cape, black everything, with a syringe held to the arm of her sister Denise, in the lap of this black creature that turned and looked at her while she tried to scream but couldn't actually get any noise out. She falls off the fence and then, screaming to try and get back up, and jumps up on the fence and scrambles, and then finds that the men have just magically disappeared. She gets to her sister, who wakes up sort of groggy and out of it, and once again, almost paralyzed. Has no recollection of it. One is, Roxanne was obviously the test subject, and Denise was just the unwilling pawn. Once again, we are benignly influenced here. That there doesn't seem to be many cases where actual harm has come to us. We're put in these terrifying situations, and no, you weren't actually attacked by a weird cryptid creature with huge fangs. It was just the sheer fear and of the prospect of it happening. So back to my idea about them using augmented, or at least concentrated, telepathy, or what I'd say, a concentrated intelligence, or this is why I'm getting late and tired. Come on, brain. It augmented, intellect as a consciousness that seems to be. They've got this sort of telepathic connection to all of them that needs to be kept in a very, very tightly, delicately controlled situation so they can use it. And my connection to the quantum field, where you are connected to your subject, if you think about it, if you think about the person, telepathically, they're linked to you, you're linked to them. What happens when you've just had a subject you've got that you want to test or you want to play with, and all they can do is see your face and constantly play it over and over and over in their mind? Like, oh my God, what did I see? I just saw this creature. And you play it again and again. If you're playing that image in your mind of that thing that was actually visiting you, you're psychically connected to it. The last thing they want is for you to be is the telephone call to be connected permanently while you have a freak out with your primitive monkey mind while they're trying to fly their craft in this highly still, almost library-like quiet in order to get their technology to work. They have to shut you off. And fear is their way of doing it.
Yeah, because the brain, well, especially with moments of fear, like your brain is really good at repressing the situation as well. So that's a really good tactic in that matter to
fear
blank out
shuts
of it.
down everything. It shuts down reason. It shuts down higher reasoning. It shuts down all sorts of things. It cements behavior. We learn through fear and we learn through danger. So if you are given a fearful situation, you learn from it very quickly. It's one of those, if you burn yourself, you learn never to do it very, very quickly, as opposed to having to learn another skill where you got to practice like crazy. So fear is almost like a way of cementing some aspect of them playing with our psychology. And it's also, I think, a way of disengaging from those they don't necessarily need to be engaged with. I say that that's one aspect of the contactee experience. The other one is people who don't have the fear factor given to them. They're almost given a calm, almost a loving experience, and almost a one-on-one communication type of thing at times. And these people, I think they're being tracked across generations, maybe. And they're the ones that don't get that fear behavior. They don't need to. They're tracking something else in them. They've already augmented something in that human bloodline, and they're tracking that. They don't need this fear behavior to just, a random subject they can get rid of.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I saw that, and I thought no one else has actually put that together as a connection between the consciousness, their technology, and them not worried about what we do with our technology, but they're definitely interested in our minds. We have something that is very different to them. We have almost like a raw intellect that has degrees of freedom to it. And if you were like, it seems, and it is actually come across from some accounts, that these greys, these other beings, they don't have the same civilization as us. They're bred almost in vitro type of stuff. They're created entities. They're almost biological robots in a way. And if you are biological robots and you've grown up in a homogeneous environment, you don't have a connection to the whole world that we have as these primitive monkeys with psychology that have so many more degrees of freedom. It's like we have much more advanced programming with regards to our experience that they don't have. And so I think they use that as a library of experience for them to know how to augment their technology.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
They don't want to necessarily...
You're right.
No, I was just going to say that they don't seem to want to harm us, not necessarily. There might be some species that seem to be hostile, but for most part, we're used as almost like a library.
Yeah. So it sort of makes me wonder, like you're saying that, like, their intellect is obviously to a certain degree, and I think the claim is like we only use like a 3% of our brain, or is it's a bit more than that? I can't remember what the actual percentage is, but
I think it's a little bit of it's one of those myths that gets sort of trotted out about this. You only use 2% of our brain. Well,
yeah.
sometimes
So
we do,
it's like, is
sometimes we
that
don't.
true,
But
or is it something
well,
that they're trying to track down so that they can try and implement it into their own ways of things, or is there something that they're trying to enlighten us with, sort of trying to be able to use the rest of their brains? Like, obviously, if we, you know, figure out how to go and use our brains to our full potential, like, what would be the outcome of that? Do we suddenly become
exactly.
gods in that sense,
Exactly. And I think that's why there is no connection to there is I'd almost if they have the ability to shut down individuals, then I dare say if they have a remote ability to influence key individuals, certain key individuals can have a very large outcome on the global stage. Do wars, do fear-based politics, does it rise and fall with whatever they're choosing it to be? Do we really have free will at this stage? Because if we did follow this path of telepathy and multiple and higher connectiveness, what could we become? What
Yeah,
would they be
that's
scared of? Could we actually fend them off? Would they be
wow.
absolutely shit scared if we did do that?
Yeah, there you go. There's another sense of that control. So
Exactly.
that's that definitely raises a big question on that. Absolutely, yeah. Stamp it down before it gets out of control.
Keep it simmering along. Like they obviously like the fact that we have something unique, but it's kept. It's a controlled environment, shall we
Yeah,
say?
absolutely. Yeah, look, well, it sort of looks that way when you look at the world, with the governments controlling us, everything that we do. The whole subject is taboo. So you talk about anything that's related to paranormal or UFOs, that your class is the crazy person. Go into an asylum where you should be in a straitjacket. That's
Yeah,
that's the control there. That's
I can look at the
yeah,
stigma of it and go, well, back in the 50s, I think Ross Coulthart has identified this as well, that the idea of the stigma around the phenomena needing to be put under Cold War era classification, this whole
Mm.
idea of, the instant suspicion with us and them type of thing. Can we use this as technology? We've got all this crash technology. Can we use it against the next guy before they get hold of it? So,
Yeah.
I don't think they have managed to get much out of it. I keep hearing stories about, most of the sightings we see are us, but things like that leak, I just,
Yeah, absolutely.
things are very porous. Even the fact Bob Lazar, was been leaked a little bit. He was definitely lambasted, but now being a little more vindicated in some ways as time goes on. There'd be a lot more than him if the program is as wide and as big and as successful as some of the conspiracists are trying to say. I stand corrected if there is actually more evidence, but in the public domain, Occam's razor says that if we aren't using this technology, then we probably don't understand it enough.
Yeah. The problem is too,
And
though, there's too much on the internet to be able to go on resource. So it's hard to figure out what is exactly true to what is not. Because there's so many different
yes,
stories out there that's bullshit and other things. So
signal to noise ratio, thanks to the internet, is is appalling now. I kind of
yeah,
liked having magazines where you literally had to, if you wanted to print something, it had to be bloody worth printing before
yeah,
and you spent your hard-earned money getting that magazine, and therefore
newsworthy.
it was newsworthy. In other words, information had higher value. Now any idiot can write anything on the net, and with a damn good AI image generator, anything can be
Yeah, that's
created.
that's what
And
we're coming to now, isn't it? Yeah, it's
yeah, so
becoming
the
horrible.
internet is where I think is no longer really where we need to be with this sort of resource to some degree. But as I said, the contactee experience is more valuable because you can't artificially create it. it's
Yeah,
it has a genuineness about it, and the fact that you don't have people just making up crap. They've said something that they feel very passionately genuine about happened to them, and is very much the same to someone else they've never heard of. A lot of people aren't into this topic. They've never researched it. Or if they have had an experience, they find out later that, oh god, that's like the the Barney Hill experience, or it's that they find out later. So they're not all manufacturing it. We can filter that out.
yeah, no, that's right. And like like you're saying, like people got nothing to gain from this as it is, and there's too much common ground. People having the same experiences, similar experiences, and I've said this a lot on the podcast too. Like not everyone back in those days they didn't know each other from a bar of soap. So they're not exactly congregating together to go and make a massive prank on the world to go, hey, look, let's go and tell them we've all been abducted and get in this joke. Big ha ha. There's
Yeah, it
it's
just doesn't
impossible to do,
seem.
especially back in the 50s and 60s.
It just doesn't seem credible. It's like the 50s and 60s. The biggest driver of society was homogeneity. That to go against the status quo just wasn't in the popular culture. It just didn't exist.
Yeah.
So yes, the contactee experience is still the most valuable, I think, for further research into this.
Yeah, and
As
it's
much
like
as
as you mentioned before too, like there should have been some more information that come out earlier. Like if you look at the when was the Cold War? Was that 50s or 60s? When was that?
Let's face it, post World War II, it's basically the 50s. By the time the Warsaw Pact was drawn up and NATO started to be formed, there was definitely lines in the sand being drawn. But the Iron Curtain that was drawn down over Germany in the closing days of World War II, that Winston Churchill dubbed, was certainly the start of it.
Yeah. So now I've forgotten where I was going to go with that. I had somewhere to go.
No, the Cold
That was out of my
War
mind.
being a cultural way of stifling flow
Yeah,
of
absolutely.
information about very strategic things. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think we've still got an element of that. I mean, there's technology that I've got ideas for creating based on how to make intelligent metals that would otherwise be a receptor of consciousness and otherwise a generator of consciousness, whether it's, actually has intelligence, but it's able to link with us. From what I've discovered of how this all works, some of my research, do I broadcast this on a forum like this? I probably wouldn't. Because let's face it, the last thing I'd want is someone like China getting their hands on even my crude ideas and taking it and developing it and actually making it work. These people, their military do not have the same values as us, let's face it, and we've gone to hot wars for a lot less. So
definitely.
It's all very well and good to be magnanimous and want this stuff to be freely disseminated, but this is still pretty powerful stuff. It could get in the wrong hands. You don't want to be going down that without your eyes open, I think.
Yeah. And I just remember what I was going to say earlier too, like in regards to like the Cold War, people that would have been researching this whole topic there, and like you're saying, leaks with Bob Lazar and such, like things would have come out eventually. You look at what's that now, like 60, 70 years? So people that would have been on their deathbeds now from those days of researching, like even after the Cold War and all sorts of stuff, and going to whatever it was, they'll be on their deathbeds now. They probably wouldn't even care about even mentioning or talking about this stuff anymore. Like I have seen, there's been some talks there where some people are on their deathbeds. They're like opening up about this, whether they're credible people or not. That's another thing. But you'd think there would be a lot more information, detail, or a lot more leaks in that sense.
Exactly, and I think that's where I think that these so-called skunk programs haven't gone as far as I think people wanted them to. They might very well have extraterrestrial materials. We've only just started to get our head around quantum computing. And the link behind quantum computing, by the way, and what I'll call syntropy, excuse me, Luigi Frantipi is one of the mathematician who came up with the idea of syntropy, where we talk about entropy, where things tend towards disorder. There is always a small amount of the universe that tends towards order. This I think, seen through the lens of quantum computing, and even some of the ideas of maybe Leonard Susskind and his holographic universe. This is pretty deep physics stuff. I mean, if I go into this much deeper than just flashing over the top, I think I'd lose a lot of people. But needless to say, I could go in for hours over that part of as well. The syntropy idea, where things tend to order themselves, that consciousness doesn't need many processes in order to create a very high-ordered state of awareness. Maybe I should back down from that one. I could go down. It's going to need actually a lot of background math. This I'd like graphics up here. This one. Follow this one. Preparation stuff. I think I'd lose a lot of people on that one. But if there's a lot of comments in down below saying, "Hey, please give us some more information on Susskind and how that relates to consciousness," I'll divest my best interpretation to make that link. But needless to say, that what we're starting to get a head around about how consciousness and how complexity evolves from consciousness, and how consciousness evolves from the complexity of our landscape to make a reasonably simple processor. The way this works going forward and backwards are actually linked, and if we can look at it through the quantum computing ideas, that things do form in a way to meet in the middle. A good example of that is, I don't know if you've seen, and I think there's someone on YouTube who's done this. Again, this has been one of those ones I'd bring up as a graphic, is you can make a chemical maze. Now, you can put an acid and a base through this maze that you've drawn, and you can put an indicator on it. Of course, where the acid turns up, the indicator goes blue or something like that. And you put these chemicals at the far end of the maze, and suddenly you watch this blue start weaving its way through like tendrils through the maze, and it finds the path to the other side of the maze, the base versus the acid. They're opposites from an energy point of view. And so the ability to solve a puzzle through the simplest way possible, without having to go through and literally crunch the numbers, and to actually, like picking a lock, you just literally find the solution to the lock in one hit. Biology can do this as well. Slime molds have this weird way of just finding food, just like that, and they go, "Oh, is that consciousness? How did they do this?" It's this syntropy. It's this ability for life or energetic systems to find their lowest form of solution to a problem very quickly. And I think the brain is doing this in a way with its environment. It forms structures that will process all this information around it the most simple way possible, and hence brains and sensory organs evolved.
Yeah. For some reason, I don't know if it's related or not, but for some reason, I immediately just started thinking jellyfish, because they don't have brains as far as I'm aware, but yet they still maintain some sort of sensory about themselves.
They're not really good at problem solvers. They're very good at just being,
a jellyfish.
They're pretty good at being a jellyfish. I haven't really seen them play a good game of chess.
No. But it's strange though how something like, as far as we're aware, when it comes to something that is a conscious body or anything of that nature, has to have some sort of brain and some sort of functionality. But yet these are a creature that can survive, grow, feed without the need for a brain or any sort
No,
of
you
form of
don't.
consciousness.
No, the brain has got a very long evolutionary history. I mean, it's simple bacteria need only to have sensory organs that just, if something touches you, you instantly have a go backwards response. Is it a brain? It doesn't really need much processing. It's just if I touch that switch, then this motor turns on for 3 seconds, and then the battery winds down and it resets. And then, that's the simplest thing you've got. Humans are a weird bunch because, like most higher organisms, we've evolved things that get tacked on top of other things and on top of other things. The brain is from an evolutionary point of view, very, very simple. I'm just going to control things like breathing and metabolism to, I sense something, maybe that changes something, and I'll tack that on the top. Then I'm going to have things like, how do I process this information? Can I do something else with it? That's another part of the brain. Then there's abstractions and higher reasoning starts creeping in. There's automatic pilot sections. There's language centers like Broca's region, which just is purely dedicated to language and language processing, that has evolved out of probably when we were birds and we had songs that we would communicate. It's a mess. It's certainly not an intelligent design. It's a hodgepodge of things dumped on top of other things that have got a patchwork between them that just sort of work eventually. But yeah, the things that are intelligent, that seemingly work in the way that a higher intelligence does, like fungus, with their mycelial network underground, small chemoreceptors, that if one tree goes down from a predator, then the mycelium feels this chemical change and can tell other trees that there's this kind of predator starting to get around the trees. Go, thanks for that. Was that an awareness? Was it a consciousness? Was it it was certainly an awareness of an environment, but did it do it consciously? It's a good one. I think there's a lot of people out there in the mushroom community arguing over that one.
Yeah, I think there's also a bug that does the same thing too. It eats the wood and kills the tree, and the tree does the same effect, like warns the others, like, hey, there's some sort of bug.
Yeah,
I can't remember what it is
herbivory.
exactly, but
There's a lot of everything from the smell you get of cut grass. Hexenol is a pheromone that other grass goes, whoa, hang on, we're being eaten. So they start producing less tissue, more silica around the edges, and they stop predation. Many plants try this trick of chemo signaling. If you go down the biology path, or molecular cell biology path, I mean, I can find you some, mind-blowing things like the cascade, the chemical cascade from our nervous system is actually a very, very similar to this chemotaxis or this chemoreception in plants. This pathway switches on in plants. We've got a chemical that's almost identical here, and that switches on to a next thing. That thing, plants do it slightly different over here. Sorry, I'm backwards. Plants do it different over here. They go to this way, but we've got something over here that we use that does the same job. And down this tree of causality in between plants and in humans, you go, shit, it's almost identical. I mean, hemoglobin, the thing that gives us red pigment, holds iron, which gives us oxygen. We move around, red blood cells, all of that stuff. Hemoglobin, porphyrin structure, these chains that hold this metal, which is iron in the middle. Plants do the same thing, except they've got a magnesium in the middle of it, and we call it chlorophyll. There's a few other bits and pieces off it, but I mean, a porphyrin structure with a metal in the middle to do something. Mollusks have the same thing, except they use copper. So convergent evolution or inherited genes, man, there's complex the biology and things and links between things. That's it's too hard to put into a podcast, but man, if you've done some science, if you've done a science degree, or you've even just done a beginner's science, and you can just go, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. So it sort of makes you like wander on the path here. Like, obviously, like these beings have the ability for this consciousness where they can sort of use some sort of telepathy to go and have some sort of contact in regards to that. So is there, do you sort of feel like there could be a way that we can evolve to get to that point there, but also be able to communicate between, like we're just saying, like, between plants and animals of that sort of consciousness nature?
I think we do it. I mean, there's plenty of societies that have been in touch with that level of consciousness for a very, very, very long time. We're constantly told by indigenous societies and older cultures that we've lost touch with that. I don't think that's a new message. I think we've heard of that all before. Maybe this is another impetus that will stimulate us to get back to that. After looking at the contactee experience and going, shit, why are they even here? What have we got to offer? And if it really is profound enough to go traveling across light years, or at very least skipping around the local area of the galaxy to come and visit us just because we have this, then it should say to us as conscious beings that we should possibly cultivate this and stop being so damn fixated on shit.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just want to go back through the comments here where Chris was saying, like, we were also talking about the whole studies and such of how we can obtain these abilities with the consciousness and whatnot. He's asked, like, have we gone through like DMT studies? Now I know that through ancient cultures, and that there's always been some sort of substance there. There's been
oh yeah, psychedelics have been an absolute classic.
psychedelics. Yep. To sort of give that higher self there, where you can have this open consciousness to be able to communicate between different worlds, as they explain it. So obviously somewhere for us to go and find ourselves.
I mean, DMT. All right, my version of it was it's being shot out of a nuclear cannon. Can you use it for psychic development? I mean, some people say they see entities, but the fact that these people never see the same entity, there's nothing consistent about the DMT experience. You might be seeing perceptions of something. It might be giving you an insight to what your brain could be seeing when fired up that much, but is it an actual link to something? I doubt it at the moment with what I know of it and what I've experienced. But it certainly does allow you to know that your brain can do a hell of a lot more than what you're doing now. Consciousness is overrated. Super consciousness and psychedelics are a very good window into something that you can say maybe there's a bit more to life than just sitting here looking at TikTok videos.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now,
It sort of makes you wonder because, like, as I was saying, like, it's been going through centuries, through ancient cultures and that, and obviously now we put it down as a what do you call it, a party drug, or no, it's not even a party drug because you're you're ziked out, but um. I'm trying to think of the word now. Like, it's one of those drugs that you do on
it's sort
occasion.
of yeah,
Recreational. That's
again,
it. Yeah.
it's sort of almost recreational. It's not we've lost the ceremonial. Most drugs are ceremonial. In fact, even when we take it in a recreational setting, we don't. It's rare that people take things by themselves necessarily. It's you do it with other people, and there's a sort of
Yep.
a routine around it, even if it's something as small as stoking a pipe and passing it to someone. That in itself becomes a sort of a ceremony, and it deserves a lot more study. It too has something very, very intrinsically connected to consciousness. They're very good tools, but yeah, I think we have to do the work and not think that there's a magic bullet that will just go, well, now I've got super consciousness because I take this pill. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah. But do you sort of feel like it could be the way to unlocking a certain degree
Absolutely.
to your brain? But obviously, we'll get to that point where we don't rely on it anymore. But it's like it's a key way to go, and hey, look, we can do this. Keep
I
working
think
on this and try and work your way to be non-reliant on the substance.
I think the biggest problem with people is they just don't have they just don't know. People live a very normal life and they just don't know what exists. People who have a psychedelic experience are just left with this sort of profound, a more profound view of life, that there's something more to it. If that's all it does is open a perception. I mean, you can't, it's the same as being, you live in a country town all your life, landlocked out in the middle of bloody back of Broken Hill or something. You're gonna, when you see the sea for the first time, it's going to be an overwhelming experience. It's going to be something you remember. You're going to see, you're going to feel the same way when you see it a second time. Yeah, probably not. But that first time, it opens your mind to something bigger, and that it's a highly influential thing, and the psychedelics have that profound effect that maybe I should be looking into this.
It's sort of the same thing too when you think about it, when people have their first experience of, like, they might not be a believer of the whole topic or paranormal or UFO nature, and the first time they experience something that sort of questions their reality, it sort of opens their mind up. The same sort of similar thing, it opens their doorway to go and, well, hang on, I need to start questioning things more critically here. Like, what am I actually seeing
Absolutely.
here? And that's
Yeah, people who absolutely grow up in a country town somewhere out in the middle of nowhere, and suddenly this sphere drops out of the sky, and three creatures sort of say, "Hey, dude, how's it going?" It's gonna.
yeah,
There's not much you can prepare yourself. How do you prepare yourself for that if you've had no other experience?
yeah, and like other stories I've had in the past there too, like where people say, like, oh, my first experience, like, I wasn't really much of a believer. Obviously, not everyone knows the topic. But when they had that initial experience, then all of a sudden they seem to be open to the perceptions of seeing other things. Like, depending on, I don't know whether seeing something that's of a UFO nature, or they're seeing something that they want to believe to be of a UFO nature. That I'm not trying to,
Exactly. Well, that's back to what Gary Nolan was saying, that they noticed that contactees have a much more active basal cell ganglia, which is, as I said, it's and as he says, that it's connected to perception and higher perception, the ability to interpret a pattern where other people wouldn't see a pattern. Yeah, once they have this, whether it's deliberately stimulated or it's it's an emergent phenomena from the experience. Either way, once you've had something that profound, it's going to make you a little more, open to the world is not what you thought it was.
Yeah,
And
definitely
I got
broadens
to
up the
admit,
spectrum.
I talk to people who are very much, you're talking about this UFO thing again, and I go, no, listen to me, this is important. They're very, very normal, and they're almost fearful of the whole. Deep down, they're actually a little bit threatened by this sort of thing that they don't have a framework to have in their head. They're sort of like, shit, if I did see it, I'd be absolutely terrified. I don't think I could deal with it. I don't have a framework in order to put any words to it. So they sort of avoid the topic. And I've had someone in my sphere of influence where I was making them watch some of these cool videos from the web, and then just positing my experience of what I've just told you all tonight, and some other things, and they're going, that kind of makes sense. It sort of left them with a framework now to understand it, and they weren't as threatened by it. They sort of felt like, yeah, there's actually a meaning to it. It's not just some ridiculously unfathomable problem that we have no control over or no way of understanding it. Because that's what most of this contactee experience seems to be. It is ridiculously bizarre, but yeah, with, as I said, more modern understanding. I think if I was to have a contact experience myself now, I'd be like, oh yeah, guys, yeah, okay, what do you want to test? Come on. I'd be a little more. It's like, oh, okay, you're gonna do the paralysis thing now. Oh yeah, okay, yeah, the paralysis thing. All right,
yeah. It's like, oh, what's that missing time again? Oh, damn it.
Here we go, the missing time thing. Yeah. So, after having this ability to sort of look at it a bit more rationally, I feel like I've got more control over my emotions of how this is perceived and how to communicate it to others.
Yeah. Look, it's honestly, it's a massive wormhole to keep continuing down, and mate, I think we'll pretty much put it there and give us a bit more preparation for the next one there, mate, and like dive down there, mate. It's getting late on your end there, so I sort of feel like it should be getting about time we sort of finish up. I'm going to continue on another episode, mate. It's absolutely fantastic having you on. It's
lovely,
wonderful, mate. Absolutely fantastic. It's definitely I love talking about this whole topic, mate. It can go all the way around anywhere it wants to go, like, because nothing is really of hard evidence here. It's just everything's all under speculation, of course, but
good data from people who are willing to give us their experiences. I'm always open to hearing more and more about it, so that there's more data. Thanks for having me on. Maybe we'll do some other deep dive if anyone asks for something a little more explanatory.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll probably put on a bit of a better time frame here to so a lot more people aren't doing a bit of a night shift with us. It was a spur of the moment live episode. So
it was. I've got to admit, it was a bit of a. I'm glad I just jumped in here at the end. I was a bit trepidatious, but look, best of luck with. Was it season 4? You said coming up.
Yeah, season 4 is coming out now. It's going to be coming out very shortly, so we'll be.
I'll look forward to keeping up to that. That'd be fantastic. All right. Yeah. Cheers, guys. You can log me off, and I'll say good night to everyone as well.
Well, that's mate. Cheers, mate. I'll see you next time. And that will do it, folks, for this episode. I hope you enjoyed the show. And don't forget, if you or someone you know has had an encounter, please get in touch with me to be featured on the podcast. If you're a fan of the show, you can support the podcast by purchasing some awesome merchandise that's available on our online store via the link provided in the episode description. So thanks for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you on the next Encounter Down Under. Hooroo!